Good evening, everyone.
Happy Thursday.
Happy Thursday indeed. It is episode 64, Simply Reincarnation.
Mm-hmm.
The audience asked about this. You asked us to do a show, and so we got together, did our research for the past many weeks. As many of you know, we're working on what could be a very sizable, kind of life-changing grant that we've used to open a research and training center. And it's all about making our case for life surviving death. And reincarnation is, well, it's some of the most compelling stuff out there because it can be fact checked. It can be fact checked in a huge way, which is really kind of exciting. And that's what we're going to talk about tonight. So why don't we just roll the opening and get right into the very interesting subject of reincarnation. Welcome, everyone. There exists a realm beyond our wildest dreams, a realm beyond reality that the gatekeepers and guardians have always told us consists of nothing but tricks of the eye, weather balloons, swamp gas, sand cranes, fairy tale myths of monsters, crackpot conspiracy theories, and desperate cries for attention.
We know this realm exists, and it's just beyond the horizon. The preset path, the well-worn walkways where the cynics want us to stay.
Instead, give this a listen. Put on your headphones, adjust your volume, close your eyes, and fasten your mental seatbelts because the twilight-tinged turnoff from reality's alluring highway is looming just ahead.
We're about to leave the plane of the easily explained, couldn't possibly be's, and the no way I just saw what I saw's, for the spaces and places where everything is possible, and if you stay long enough, even probable. We're about to take a journey into the outer realms.
All right, and we're back. Caught me with the headphones to my ear. Good evening, Ronald.
Hi, Ronald. Hi, Adam.
Adam, our pirate captain. Ahoy there, me mate.
Hi, Adam.
Thanks for joining us. And so here we go. Here we go with reincarnation. Let's just dive right in because we, all the background material is interesting, but the cases, both the famous cases and what you've done through your work as a certified hypnotherapist, past life regression specialist, and the regressions that you and I have been on have yielded, I think, some very compelling things. They have us, and we've talked about it on past shows. I've been thinking this could be absolutely, forget subverting the paradigm. This could blow certain paradigms right out of the water. So when you start looking at reincarnation seriously, the first thing you'll notice is that it's referenced in numerous religious and philosophical systems, and lots of written works going all the way back to the earliest recorded time.
Yes.
And we just learned the other night that 50% of the world population believes, without a doubt, they don't need proof, they're not exploring it, it's not a theory, but yes, we come back. And of course, that gets into karma, samsara, all of that kind of thing. So Hinduism, Jainism, Buddhism, Sikhism, all Sikhism is reincarnation is prevalent there. Tibetan Buddhism discusses death. It discovers bardo, which is an intermediate state for growing up Catholic. I immediately think of purgatory, and rebirth in texts such as the Tibetan Book of the Dead, which has inspired so many writers, fiction, nonfiction researchers. Plato wrote about reincarnation. The Orphic mystery schools, also in Greece, at Eleusis, taught reincarnation about the 6th century BC. So this is just part of the fabric of life. Pythagoras, the mathematician, believed in reincarnation. Virgil, Plotinus, it's in the Hermetica. Now we're getting into the Romans. They believed in reincarnation. Celtic paganism discusses it. The Gauls possibly were taught this by a slave of Pythagoras. So it was so much part of the fabric that as they went out into the world, they taught people about it. It's prevalent in German paganism, in Judaism, in both the Zohar and the Kabbalah. So the more esoteric texts talk about it. Taoist texts from early as the Han Dynasty, so we're talking 200 BC now, even further back than the Greeks, said that Lao Tzu reincarnated multiple times. Christianity, it's a little more
subtle in the Bible.
Yeah, it's a little buried, but there are ideas that Jesus was Elijah and John the Baptist was Jeremiah, and they came back, reincarnated. As we get more into modern times, we get into the philosophers, Schopenhauer, Nietzsche, Henry David Thoreau, Walt Whitman, Ralph Waldo Emerson, so the transcendentalists and the naturalists and all, they believed in reincarnation. And finally, the American Society for Psychical Research and the British Society for Psychical Research, founded respectively in 1885 and 1882, made cases, documented cases of reincarnation. I want to remind the audience that the American Society for Psychical Research was actually founded by William James, who is the father of modern psychology. So a very, very serious person. I finished Arthur Conan Doyle's Land of the Mist, which is fiction, supposedly a Professor Challenger book, but really is his case in 1926 for spiritualism. And he says that the bishop of one of the Eastern Bloc countries, Eastern European countries, I forget which, was also the president of their Psychic Research Society. So there you have it.
Mm-hmm. So in terms of scientific research into reincarnation, there has actually been a lot, quite a bit. It's been going on for quite some time. Certainly Dr. Ian Stevenson, who is a medical doctor, also the chair of the Department of Psychiatry at the University of Virginia, from 1957 to, I don't know, but I know we passed in 2007. I don't know how long he was the chair. However, during his time, he did an immense amount of research into this topic of reincarnation and produced a lot of evidence to support the case for reincarnation. So he wrote an article in 1958 that appeared in Harper's Magazine, and he was just kind of lamenting the gatekeepers in science. And, you know, it's still the case. Unfortunately, anything that doesn't fit into the paradigm is just immediately shunned. And if you want to be taken seriously at all, you don't talk about certain things or research.
And that is just now starting to change. But
now,
considering that we're well over 100 years, we're 120 years into serious scientific research.
Yeah.
That the gatekeepers are still kind of going, oh, if you can't test it with our tools, it can't be tested. Right. But it doesn't fall under the realm of your tools, sorry to say. But anyway,
right, exactly.
Let's go.
Exactly. So that same year, interestingly, the American Society for Psychical Research had a contest, and they were looking for proof of the survival of consciousness after death. And Stevenson's essay examining 44 cases that he had been studying won that contest. In 1966, he released a book called 20 Cases Suggestive of Reincarnation. In 1997, there were 2 volumes, 2,200 pages of cases that he had studied over the years supporting reincarnation, on the topic of reincarnation and biology, which we'll talk a little bit about. But things like birthmarks. So someone who had a recollection of a past life and how they died. If there was a wound, they would have a corresponding birthmark in that location. Hi, Lori.
Lori says, hi, fiends. That's what we get. We just made Lori the newest member of the Red Thread Collective. And we are fiends.
We are fiends.
We are fiends. We're mocking science, I guess, though.
But
anyway, hi, Lori. I couldn't resist.
Sure,
I'm pretty sure it was.
Friends. So the Journal of American Medicine.
Journal of the American Medical
Sorry, that's what I meant to say. Journal of the... God, I can't talk. What
the AMA. Talk about gatekeepers, folks.
Yes. Called The Cases Hard to Explain, Other Than Reincarnation.
Which is a really big deal.
It's a big deal.
If you think about how conservative the AMA is, how they're against alternative medicine, herbal medicine, essential oils, kind of eradicated midwifing, for a long time. For them to say that it was hard to explain other than reincarnation, that was a very big deal.
Definitely. And then, of course, Dr. Jim Tucker picked up the work in the late 1960s into the early 1970s. He was studying, again, a lot of cases, but particularly some cases where 2 to 3 year olds. So that seems to be around the time that the memories come. And I know we're going to talk about our personal experience with that, but that it's very consistent with that. So around 2 or 3 children seem to start to, I think too, they probably remember it, but they're able to articulate it around that time. They probably can't articulate it before then, but that's when they start to talk about recollections of past lives. Sometimes they'll have irrational phobias. They'll have nightmares. They may be afraid of, something connected to the way that they passed. They'll play. We're going to talk about some cases where it very much shows up in the way that the children play. So Jim Tucker would test these children with photos. And so he would come with photos that were definitely connected to the memories that they were having of the past life and photos that had nothing to do with it. And they would very frequently select the photos that were indeed connected to the past lives that they were talking about.
I found it very interesting with Jim Tucker, who I have a lot of respect for, also at the University of Virginia, immense amount of respect, but he would show 2 photos. So he wouldn't get too complicated. I think my inclination would be to show 3 to 5 photos. But typically he showed them a pair. Do you know this person? Do you know this person? What was really compelling, first of all, they were kids, so we don't need to, we're not going to assume that they're lying.
Right.
We don't have to make them jump through ridiculous hoops. And they would, and we've seen tapes of some of these interview sessions, it's not like, I think that one. As a kid would do. But it was like, nope, don't know that one. Definitely know that one. That was my house where I lived in. That was the yard where we played. So it was so definitive. I just want to backtrack a little. I know you and I are working on a book. Hopefully will come out in 2023, I think, about talking to your kids about the paranormal, about these kinds of things. The irrational phobias. If you have a child that for some reason is just scared to death of bridges or getting on an airplane, or they see a knife and they immediately freak out, it could be a clue. That's all I'm saying.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, so back to Jim Tucker.
So Jim Tucker, he found that there seemed to be an average of 4.5 years. Not always. Again, there are some cases where there's definitely a lot more time lapse, but the average seems to be 4.5 years between death and reincarnation. He studied 2,500 cases, which is just kind of mind-boggling, and also found this interesting statistic. Natural deaths occur in 50%, like 50% male, 50% female. Unnatural deaths, however, 72% are male as opposed to 28% female, which is just really interesting as well. And that seemed to correlate exactly, again, to these past life memories. So, and then Jim Tucker has 2 books, Return to Life and Life Before Life. And
exactly the percentages. So in these reincarnation cases, 50-50 male, female, natural, unnatural, 72-28. That's amazing when you're talking about 2,500 cases for that to match up like that. That's why I say, like, you cannot make a case for life after death without including, or you'd be foolish to not include reincarnation. Before we get into the next section where we're going to talk about, there's lots and lots of interesting cases. Obviously, there's thousands. But we chose 5 that are the most compelling to us. And they tend to be the ones that show up over and over again that Tucker and Stevenson were involved with, so on and so forth. But one of them, Mahatma Gandhi, was involved in, actually. But want to say hi to Craig Ansel, another Red Threader. Craig is also, we say it every week and we're going to keep saying it, one of the co-hosts of Three Beards podcasts, a very, very high quality podcast. They're always upping their game, trying new things, interesting guests on a variety of subjects. And that is 7 o'clock and 8:30. They do 2 different shows back to back on Wednesday nights, Eastern Standard Time. So let's get into these compelling cases. Many of you may be aware of the case of the reincarnated World War II pilot. The reincarnated person was James Leininger. And he remembers being James Houston Jr. So when he was very, very young, he would have recollections of the horror of a plane crash, of being trapped. He would have nightmares starting very, very early. I think even nonverbal, where he would be in his crib kicking his legs, pushing as if he was trying to get out of something, de-cocoon himself, sort of. And that's not typical behavior, even for a disturbed little child, or a child who's having night terrors or something like that. So as he becomes verbal, he names his ship. Then he names one of his fellow crew members, Jack Larson. As he gets older, he gets 3 G.I. Joe dolls, the 12-inch figures that we all had, and they all have different color hair. And he names each one of them by names that a little kid wouldn't typically name their G.I. Joes. So his parents are really, really paying attention. I give his parents huge credit throughout this whole process. Really, it's very impressive. I'd like to think that we would have been that same way if Jeremy's memories had persisted. He also started to talk about the place that he died. So his father had enough data that he started doing research, because the kid is obsessed. He's dressing like a little fighter pilot. He loves to go to air shows. He's drawing plane battles over and over. On those drawings, he signs them James 3, which comes to light a little bit later. He knew things about airplanes that no 5 or 6-year-old knows. How they worked, what parts they had, the different designs, all those different kinds of things. At 6, he's describing how to make napalm.
Yeah.
It's not funny. It's only funny. It's only funny in the sense that it's so compelling. Exactly. Something's obviously going on here.
Exactly.
So Dad starts hitting the Google or whatever at the time, and he finds that he can verify all these facts. The name of the ship wasn't quite, he was saying the Natoma, and I think it was actually called the Natoma Bay, but definitely close enough. The island that he was describing, the place he was describing, was Iwo Jima. And there was only one pilot that was killed at the Battle of Iwo Jima off the island, and his name was James Houston. So there you go. That's why he was James Houston Jr., therefore the James 3. So it all starts to fall in place. Then his father starts looking at records of the USS Tacoma Bay, and he finds a Jack Larson, and he finds 3 guys with the names of the dolls of the G.I. Joe. So it's getting very, very compelling. Then they go to James Houston Jr.'s sister, and she verifies a bunch of facts. I love when family members don't just go, "No, you're crazy, stay away from me."
Yeah, exactly.
But actually talk with them, because this really,
it
really helps with the verification process. James, who I believe was just about a teenager by the time, and James Houston Jr.'s sister, they immediately connected. They felt like they knew each other their whole lives upon meeting. This doesn't always happen. In the Hollywood case, it didn't go so great. So the family travels all the way to the site where James Houston Jr.'s plane crashed. They put flowers in the water. They do a ceremony, and the boy has some closure. There's tape of this that you can see, and he really had closure. So that was amazing. So let's move on to another Another case.
Yeah, this one I found extremely fascinating as well. I find all of it fascinating, but there's a woman in Sweden by the name of Barbro, and she recalled her past life as Anne Frank. And so from the time she was 2, she would tell her parents that her name was Anne, that her name was not Barbro, her name was Anne. So they weren't quite sure what to make of it, but when she was 6, they took her to Amsterdam, and they were going to go see the Anne Frank house. And her father had said, we'll take a taxi or whatever. And she said, no, we're close enough that we can walk. She knew exactly where it was at 6 years old, having never been to Amsterdam.
A 10-minute walk away.
Yeah, it was 10 minutes away. She was able to find it easily. And then when they went inside, she was able to lead her parents to a hiding place behind the wall. There was also another room, and she said, oh, the pictures are still there. And her parents weren't quite sure what she was talking about because they weren't seeing any pictures. And then all of a sudden she looked and the pictures were gone, and she was very confused. But they were able to confirm with one of the caretakers of the house that the pictures had been there, and people were touching them and taking them. So they had taken the pictures down and they were going to put them behind glass. But she remembered exactly what pictures were there, exactly where they were. Barbro was a writing prodigy herself, and her first book was published at the age of 12, and she's written 9 more. She wrote 9 more during her tweens. What is the matter with my mouth today? I can't talk. During her teens, and she won Sweden's highest award for novel writing as a teenager, which is pretty outstanding.
I definitely wanted to include this one because let's be honest. When you hear, in a past life I was Cleopatra, in a past life I was Charlemagne, in a past life I was whoever, celebrity, famous person, whatever, your skepticism meter immediately starts to move towards cynicism. Mm-hmm. We were sent a book possibly to read or research with someone who does readings where only celebrities come through, famous people come through, and we chose not to do it. It's a tough case, and when people talk about reincarnation, that's the first thing they say. It's a great line in Bull Durham, a movie that I love, where Kevin Costner's character and Susan Sarandon's character smoke a little weed, and they're talking about reincarnation, and they're like, why do people always come back as somebody famous? Why don't they come back as a maid or a servant or something?
As a hypnotist, as a regressionist, I have to say that I have not regressed anyone who had a memory of a famous past life. So I think that really isn't prevalent. I think that's maybe the ones that people hear about.
Right, and remember or promote.
They're a little more memorable, but for the most part, people have very normal, remembrances of very normal lives.
So Lori says, I have a great past life regression. Unbelievable, really. Well, this is where we would definitely believe it. Hello, Angelina. And hopefully Lori will share that with us at some point.
Yeah. I know what it is, but I'm going to
cool.
For Lori to share.
Okay, we'll have Lori. Lori's going to be a guest on the show, and if we have time, they'll be talking about crystal skulls. She and Michelle Bowser. We're going to get to that. So let's stay on topic for right now. This is an interesting one. Semi-famous, kind of famous, not really famous, but attached to Hollywood. No, if you really think about it, raise your hand if you've heard about the actor Marty Martin. But he did pretty good for himself. But Marty Martin was reincarnated as a young man named Ryan Hammonds. And he had terrible nightmares about 4.5 years old because he's recalling details of a life that he is not living. Mm-hmm. So his nightmares weren't about a horrible death or anything like that. I believe Marty Martin died of natural causes. Yes, when he was 59, because that was a key part of the case. But he's starting to recall these details of a life in Hollywood where he has children, where he has a big swimming pool. So his mom, again, invests interests. I think that's what made these cases really stick and really prevalent. Yeah. Because mom and dad didn't say, oh, it's just your imagination, stop. And the child eventually forgot. Because the median age, I think you mentioned, is like 4.5 years old for past life recall. So by the time you get a little older, you forget. And some of the kids that we've watched the taped interviews with, they say, I just want to fully invest with this life. And Jim Tucker will say, probably the best thing to do is to leave that life behind and fully invest in this one. So that's how it kind of goes. So his mom sticks with it, and she gets a book about the golden age of Hollywood. And sure enough, she's flipping through it, and he goes, that's me. And that's my friend George. And I think it was George Zucker or someone like that, maybe an actor that was a little more well-known. And it was a film called Night After Night. So again, if anybody knows the Marty Martin film, Night After Night, please raise your hand. But he could also identify all kinds of other pictures shown to him by Jim Tucker. And 100%, he nailed it. Pictures of Marty's last wife. He was married numerous times, Marty, very Hollywood. And also a friend, a senator from New York. Now, even if a kid like was really into Hollywood and had a good memory, you're not going to remember some senator from New York.
Right.
I didn't even write down the senator's name because it's not even a famous, senator from New York. So Dr. Tucker reaches out to Marty's daughter. We alluded to the fact that it doesn't always go great. But the daughter does verify several statements. What I thought was very interesting is there were things that she thought were wrong.
Initially,
no, my dad never had a green card.
Right.
Turns out dad did have a green card. So that's where you have the outside research, the inside research, the interviews all coming together. Super, super compelling. There are also about a half a dozen things, right, that were wrong. But on further investigation, they found out was right. So it wasn't just kind of like one thing. One of the biggest things was on his birth certificate, it said he died when he was 61 years old. But Ryan insisted, no, I was 59 when I died as Marty Martin. Turns out they dug more research and he had kind of fudged his age at some point.
Yep.
So that's a really nice data point.
Yeah.
As a researcher, you go, wow, right? Like my grandmother was actually, I believe, 4 or 5 years older than she was. They fibbed about her age so that she could get citizenship easier. They made her look older than she was. And it wasn't until they dug out her birth certificate when she died in her, I believe, 80s that they realized the discrepancy. So these things did happen. That was a great data point. All in all, 50 of Ryan's statements about his past life were verified. Pretty cool.
Yeah. Then there's Shanti Baby from Delhi, and she started to remember her past life at age 4. And she remembered her husband and her family, and she tried to run away to find her husband, who lived in Mathura, which was miles away. And they also found it very interesting. At age 4, she had a Mathura dialect and not a Delhi dialect. When she spoke, she knew her husband's name, Kedar Nath. This was confirmed. And she was able to verify that she died 10 days after childbirth. The husband was able to confirm that. And there were 9 years between her death and her reincarnation. And they did take her finally to meet the husband, and he was able to verify pretty much everything that she remembered. So Mahatma Gandhi you mentioned earlier, Mahatma Gandhi got involved in one of the cases, and he looked into the case, and he investigated it and did believe that she was, in fact, a reincarnation.
He headed up a commission. Now, there were other people who came out and said, no, this is not substantiated. But look, this is a 6-year-old girl with an, I meant to convert to miles, but I believe it was 125 kilometers away. So it was a good distance away. She had a dialect from that place, not from where she was born. She ran away. She said, I have a husband named Kedar Nath. This is in, let's not forget, the 1930s. There's no internet. She's not a kid on her iPad or some kind of nonsense like that, and stumbles upon this thing. So the nosy, nasty naysayers, as Stanton Friedman, dearly departed, used to call them, just kind of got in and said this wasn't what was going on. So this case isn't necessarily famous, but I read about this in a book. I believe I know we have the guest coming up, Mike Anthony. It's coming up next week. He wrote a book, Love, Dad. He's featured on the Netflix series Surviving Death.
Surviving Death.
We're excited to have Mike on. He's an actor, just a really, really good guy. We have a lot in common. Both love Lin-Manuel Miranda, so on and so forth. But so there's an ex-cop. He's a security guard. After he retires, he's shot in the heart during a robbery. 5 years later, his daughter has a son born with an underformed pulmonary artery. Right exactly where he got shot.
And it is common to see people reincarnate along family lines.
Yeah, and it plays again in with the birth marks and all these different kinds of stuff. Reincarnating along family lines, we have a case that touches on that possibly a little. So for our audience is growing all the time, for which we're very, very thankful. I should also mention too that not only do we do this live show, but then the show is rebroadcast on KGRA radio on Tuesday nights at 2 a.m., ERRT radio on Wednesday nights at 10 p.m., and Patriot radio on Friday nights at 8 p.m. So to all our growing audience, our growing amount of listeners, why don't you tell them about last year you made a big decision to add another major tool to your toolbox.
Right. So in early 2020, I decided I wanted to get certified in hypnosis, which was something I've wanted to do for a long time. And it's just, this is just kind of how it works for me. It's like I want to do something for a really long time. It was the same with massage. I wanted to do it for years. And then all of a sudden it's like, ding, it's time. I have to do it right now.
Mm-hmm. And every single one of them.
Yeah, all of them have been that way. Yep. So, and I attribute that to my guides just going, okay, now it's time for this piece. Anyway, so I was able to find an amazing hypnosis trainer half an hour away from here. I got my hypnosis certification in May of last year. And then just a few months after that, I had an opportunity, and you know, I don't believe in coincidences. I think it was placed in my lap, but I happened to be online because I really wanted to pursue the hypnosis more into the past life regression. That was really my interest. You know, of course, I can do hypnosis to stop smoking, to lose weight, to help with stress and all of that. And I love doing that, but I really wanted to explore the past life regression. So I happened to be online. Lo and behold, the ARE, which is the Edgar Cayce Foundation in Virginia Beach.
The what for Research and Enlightenment?
Association for Research and Enlightenment.
I always forget the A.
And Peter Woodbury was offering an online past life regression training. And Peter Woodbury had studied with Brian Weiss, for those of you who are familiar with Many Lives, Many Masters. So I had the opportunity to do that training, and it's been amazing. So now I am, if anyone is interested, just visit my website, Tanya Madia, TonyaMadia.com, and you can check out how to contact me if you're interested in a past. I call them soul contact sessions because you're going to get whatever it is that you're most meant to get. Might be a past life regression, might be something even more interesting. You never know. So
a colleague of ours, part of a research group that we're part of called The Seekers, under the direction of one of the pillars of the field of paranormal research, Brent Rains, wrote the definitive biography of John Keel. And Barbara and her colleague, Lynn Miller, they wrote a book together and they were guests on the show. So you definitely want to check that out if you missed it. It was awesome. Convergence is the name of their book. Wonderful, about all things paranormal. And the point of that was
the soul contact
right.
session.
And you did that for Barbara. Thank you.
Yeah, and it was very therapeutic and healing for her, and that's
profound.
What happens. So you never know what you're going to get, but it's always going to be something that's amazing for you. So if you're interested, check out my website.
Cool. So that wasn't our first experience with reincarnation. You doing this work and are getting involved in it, not even 10 or 11 years ago, but 23 years ago.
Yes.
If you want to talk about that.
So our son, Jeremy, when he was 2.5, 3 years old, would wake up from his naps
when he went to sleep. It took him forever to wake up and come back to this plane. You have trouble you really have to transition back into, you guys go deep when you go.
Yeah, I was going to say, for people who go into a really deep sleep, like deep theta, I think it is kind of hard. It takes a little while to transition back into like alpha, beta.
As opposed to Jolie and I sleep with our eyes open.
Yeah, exactly. So he would wake up very befuddled and confused, and he would look around the room and he'd say, where am I? Like, where's my where's my wife and kids? And he would talk about being a fireman and how the hoses were very heavy and the fires were very hot. We probably didn't know enough back then to maybe ask the right kind of questions.
No, we absolutely did.
To try to get like more details. I'd love to go back. And
we did show interest. It was fascinating because my being an actor, being a writer, 3-year-old kid the hoses are so heavy. Right. The fire was so hot. Right, it was very compelling. Yeah.
So I kind of wish we would have known what kind of questions to ask to get a little more detail, so we could have done some research. But he was very, very committed to that. He really was upset about where his family and his children went. And I forget how many. At one time, I think he told us how many children he had, but it was several. And he wanted to get back to his wife and kids. So we'll talk a little bit more about that, because I had the opportunity, once I got the hypnosis, the past life hypnosis certification, I wanted to explore. No, I'm talking about something else. I don't know
what you're talking about.
I'm jumping ahead. Shortly after that, Jeremy was 4, maybe 5 years old. And we were having lunch one afternoon, and he was just looking at me. And like, I'm just like wondering, I got something on my face, like what's going on? And finally he goes, "It's you." And I was like, "Yeah, it's your mom." And he was like, No. Don't you remember when I used to be a grown-up and we were friends, and I would come and pick you up and brush your hair, and we would go dancing? And I was like, no, but that is pretty amazing. So that's what I was talking about. Once I got my certification, I really wanted to find out what that past life that Jeremy and I shared was. And I had the opportunity to do that.
Are you going to talk about that tonight?
I thought we had that on the list.
I think we could put it right under here. I guess you snuck that one by me. So I'm going to be hearing about it too, which is great. So
I thought I told you about that.
I had a couple friends when I went to school in Philadelphia. And one of them would go like monthly, for past life regression. And I didn't even know what to say about it. I was learning a lot. Philadelphia, very spiritual town. There were a lot of things, a lot of holistic healers there, that kind of thing. I think there are some schools for holistic medicine in the eastern part of Pennsylvania. Very progressive in that way, but I just didn't know what to make of it. I had a friend who lived on my hall who could see auras. We talked about that with Chris Garcia a couple weeks ago, and that was very interesting because it answered a lot of questions for me. But one of my roommates, and I had a couple, but one of my roommates started to date a girl years later, probably a decade after we got out of college. Eventually he married her. And but on their first couple dates, they didn't go well because she would always get these splitting, excruciating headaches. Well, she was into these kinds of things and past life and all of that. And she found out that in a past life, I would say like in, I don't want to say medieval times, the Middle Ages is the correct way to say it. They were very poor. They were sort of peasants, or he was an artisan or whatnot. She got very, very, very sick. And he was going to mercy kill her. She asked him to. So he takes an axe or a sword, something like that. He's not very good with it at all. And he messes it up. And there were the head wounds, the memories of that past life that they had together. You and I have no definitive proof of a past life together. Well, no, the one instance of the school, right, in Greece, that's on the list.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I have some ties to Greece, which I'll talk about. Colette McCardle, we need to stop everything right now. Colette is here. Please, everyone into the Outer Realms audience, it is Colette's birthday today.
Happy birthday,
So please, let's all
Colette.
send out a big Collective. Colette was one of the first people to ever tune into our show. She's saying it loud and proud. There it is. It's your birthday
Happy
today.
birthday.
So I saw that on the Facebooks today where there are no secrets.
On the Facebooks.
Sometimes it can be good. And so happy birthday, Colette. Thanks for spending some of your time with us. Here come the happy birthdays. We're just going to roll them right up here.
We have
Here
such
we
a great
go.
audience. Everyone
Yeah.
is just so wonderful.
Awesome. So, your personal experiences, some of them have been incredibly profound.
Right. So, gosh, I don't even know where to start, but I guess I'll start
with that Jeremy.
With the Jeremy.
Yeah.
So I was really curious, and so what I should say too is that during the past life regression training, we had, of course, the opportunity to practice on one another, and so I got to have several regression sessions during that training. So I got to explore, all these things, and one of the first ones I wanted to explore was this, potential past life with Jeremy. And what I found out was during that past life, generally the way it works too is like suddenly you're just in a scene in a day of this past life, and it'll be something that's relevant or significant, right? So that's what happened, and all of a sudden I'm in an apartment, and based on my clothing, based on the furniture, based on just like the radio that I'm seeing and everything around me, it's very clear that this is like the 1940s. And I know that I'm living in an apartment with my parents. I'm probably in my 20s, and I'm waiting for a phone call from a girlfriend. And the phone rings, and my father answers it, and I take the phone, and it's my girlfriend, who I immediately know is Jeremy in a past life. And she's going to come and pick me up in her car, and we're going somewhere. And and again, this is kind of how it works in these past life regression sessions. And some of you some of our audience tonight have had these sessions with me, so they know this. You just know things. You just like you would, like if you just picked up as a day in your life, there's certain things that you know. And so I knew that we were going to a dance at a local community center. So, little time goes by. I look out the window. There's a car. It's a green car, by the way. And
not Marty Martin, though.
It's not Marty Martin. It's a little bit late or early. I guess it would be a little bit early for Marty Martin. But anyway,
cool.
It's my girlfriend, and I can see what she's wearing, and down to the detail in the dress. She knocks on the door. And we go to this dance. Now, she did not, in this particular scene on this particular day, she did not brush my hair the way that Jeremy remembered it, but I'm sure there were occasions where she would help me with my hair. So we go to, it's like a local, I don't know, like a moose lodge or something, like a community center where there's a dance. The music is clearly 1940s, and there are soldiers dressed in uniforms who are there as well. And then just kind of all the details from that. So that told me what I needed to know. I mean, there wasn't a lot of detail in terms of who were we, where did we live, how did we know each other, how did we become friends. I could always go back and try to find, have more experiences and find out those details. But
did
that
Jeremy
was enough
look like
for
Jeremy?
me. He, in some ways, the hair was blonde.
Because it's been interesting. There's a picture of you when you're little,
Mm-hmm.
and it's the spitting image of Jeremy.
Mm-hmm.
And when he was the same age as you were in that photo, I showed that picture. My grandmother came over to the house. And I brought her into the hallway, and I said, "Grandma," I said, "have a look at this picture right here." And she got all angry.
She was
she
so
said,
mad at
"You
us.
put Jeremy in a
Why
dress.
did you
You're
put
just
him in
horrible.
a
Why did you
dress?"
put that little boy in a dress?"
She was so
That's
mad.
how much you guys looked
We
alike.
really do.
And of course, Jeremy then in Play For Me, he played a woman. Velveteen Bosoms
Mm-hmm.
in a murder mystery. Love is a heart full of bullet holes. And his girl, just really quick, his girlfriend at the time was sitting at a table with these two guys. And I gave Jeremy like a Great Torch song. And he's got the feather boa and all this stuff. And he's doing the thing. He's in the dress, Marilyn Monroe wig and all of that. And boy, these guys are going on as how beautiful this woman is. And his girlfriend at the time, I always said her name. She said, Thank you. That's my boyfriend. And of course, the guys are all kind of embarrassed and all. It was a great credit to the brilliant actor that our son is, and just
He really
good looking like his mom, thank goodness. And so those are just strange overlaps. And it does bring in this idea that we're going to talk about more tonight, about the gender switching and the race switching. So you want to talk about your experience with Joe and with your mom?
Yeah. So, well, I want to talk about that, but I want to throw something else in because we talked about this a little bit with Barbara and Lynn. I kept thinking Linda, and I knew that was wrong. I'm so sorry, Lynn.
It takes two of us to do this show, especially
Lord,
midnight.
what is wrong with my brain? So Lynn and Barbara, I think, mentioned this, that sometimes people just have like spontaneous, it's like you haven't been regressed, but it'll show up in a dream. And for Barbara, I think it just happens during her waking life, these spontaneous like memories. But I had a dream many years ago. I was probably in my early 20s, and it was so real and so vivid that I know it was a past. I just know. I know it was. And I was an African man, and it was so real. Like I could feel like what it was like to have this incredibly powerful body. I just had, these immense muscles, and I was running, and to have that kind of power, like something I haven't experienced in my like 5'3" frame in my lifetime, but to have that kind of power and to look down and see my skin as this like ebony, and to have this experience, right? So I knew that I had at least one past life.
And you have some protector spirits that manifest that way, which opens up some questions too.
I have some spirit guides that would match with that, like a past life in Africa. But in another past life session that I had, and I was curious to know if I had a past life with my daughter, Jolie. And so in this particular past life, I look down, and I am a slave boy. Probably 12, 13 years old. I can see my clothes are kind of torn and tattered. I can see my skin is very dark. I just know, again, I didn't know my name, but I did know that I was like 12, 13 years old. I knew that I was a slave. I knew where I was. I knew what I was doing. And what I was doing was kind of going through the bayou. My mother was very sick in this past life, and I was going to see a voodoo priestess because I wanted to get a remedy to bring to her. And I had this little boat, and I'm rowing the boat through the bayou, and I'm looking up. And again, the detail that you get, or at least that many people get, is amazing. So I can see the moss coming down off the trees. I can see the moon because it's nighttime. I can hear the frogs. And I'm rowing the boat, and then all of a sudden I lose my paddle, and I'm just sitting there in the darkness, in the bayou. Like, what do I do? There's alligators that I can hear. But I know it's going to be okay somehow. And all of a sudden I see, like, I have a lantern, and I see another lantern sort of coming toward me. And I realize that it's another young boy, and he is the son of the voodoo priestess, and he tows me there. And we get to the bank, and what was really interesting about this part for me is subsequently I looked up, just like, I don't even remember what I Google searched, but it was like Louisiana Bayou, like shack, hut, whatever. And this was exactly how it looked. I mean, it's like right on the bank. There's sort of like this little makeshift like dock to like tie a boat, and everything looked very, very much like this. So anyway, we go inside. I get the remedy. It's late now. So the voodoo priestess, who, by the way, happens to be my daughter, Jolie, in this life, which really makes sense for Jolie with the wisdom that she came in with.
No kidding.
And her abilities. And she would not let me return because it was too late, too risky, too dark and everything. So I slept on the floor in her, I guess you would call it a cabin, a shack. I don't know what you would call it. But, and then I returned the next day. And I'm sneaking back on to the plantation, and one of the other slaves sees me. And it seems like just the way that we're looking at each other, that he's not going to say anything. And I go in, I give my mother the remedy. When I go in to see my mother, I realize that my mother in that life was my mother in this life. And it explained a lot. about the relationship dynamic, a lot about my mother in this life. Anyway, it gets found out later that day that I had snuck off, and I am brutally beaten just outside our quarters. And my mother is just completely, of course, hysterical and beside herself, watching her son just get beaten to death. And I think that really explained
to death. You died?
I died.
Wow.
So that's how I died in that life. And it was getting a remedy for my mother. So there's all this guilt, right? And then there's this, well, for her, like karmically coming into this life. And it just explains so much about our dynamic, which is a whole,
another reason,
whole show on,
why this stuff is helpful. So
dynamics.
So for me, other than a formal past life regression that you did with me, which we'll get to, and we're going to breeze through because there's video of it. Of the entire thing. But I had two dream experiences that were very vivid, and I knew that they weren't dreams. And one, I was a fisherman in a Greek village. I think maybe 1800s. Hard to say, really. And then, of course, you did one where I was there in ancient Greece. We were in a school of sorts, which was interesting. That connects us, no?
Well, it was like ancient Greece, but I actually feel like that was sort of a life between lives kind of thing because of some of the other elements in that. But and
the other one was I was part of the Italian resistance in World War II, and they came into the room and shot and killed me. I was found out, and Mussolini's people came in, which could explain a lot about the work that I do, social justice. I have a very strong sense of fairness, justice, equality, all those kinds of things, the pirate work and everything else. Speaking of which, and again, we are going to go through this quickly, and then I do want to get to Colette's comment here. On December 10th, 2020, you regressed me into a past life, a couple as it turned out, but live on this show. You guys can find that. It's episode number 45. It's on the YouTube channel, the Joy Media YouTube channel. Every day is a story all its own, or right here on Facebook, although it's easier to nav YouTube than go all the way through somebody's stream. So I would go there. And it goes through the whole thing. But what spurred it on to do it, not only to show the audience how it works, to demystify it a little, but excuse me, especially to our radio audience, excuse me. People always ask me, because of the pirate work that I do and the authenticity of the characters and my knowledge of all of it, were you a pirate in a past life? And some psychics or whatever have said, yes, you were. You definitely were. Well, we did not find proof of that. But I'm trying to look for some dates here. I think it was I was on the dock when it started. I'm selling a newspaper. It's November of 1723. Anyway, it goes through where my father barters me for debt to be a member of a crew. I'm on a ship. I'm on a merchant ship. For a while, I think I was in the Queen's Rangers based on my costume. I'm like all of 15 years old when this bartering happens. You can see it all. It's very, very detailed. But then we get to the end of my life. Prior to that, we learned that a very good friend of mine, a collaborator, really a dear friend, like a brother to me, Sam, we knew each other in that life. My father was not my father. Nobody else from this current life that I recognized was in it. I knew that the ship was named the Sturgeon. I've done research and I haven't found it. It's really hard to find information online about merchant ships in the early 1700s. First of all, there were so many of them. They changed names. They weren't always registered correctly. But I was a sailor. I was attached to the Eastern Seaboard. Like I said, I became a soldier, and then I was at the end of my life, and I watched myself die somewhere in the jungle, I think in the West Indies or maybe Africa. It was 1748. I was about 40 years old. That was very difficult. You talked me through it. But watching yourself die and the aloneness, the incredible aloneness, the people who were around me were local. I didn't speak their language. They were circled around the campfire. And then I had a second one in Bavaria where I was a little kid and I was being neglected by my mother because she was flirting with some man when my father wasn't there. So that was interesting. So if you're interested in that, and then we went to this current life. You can see that again. It's the show from December 12th, and it's called Live Past Life Regression. This time has gone so fast. So let's look at some audience comments here. So Colette, the birthday girl, says, I was told that I was a Kenyan woman in a past life. Always felt connected to Kenya. Been there 12 times and always feel comfortable there.
Wow.
Honor that. There are past life cards. There are past life regressionists. Pay attention to your dreams. Ask for a dream about a past life, and it may explain why we're fascinated in the things we're fascinated in. Our daughter, from a very, very early age, I'm not going to specify, but there were some subjects that she was dark subjects where we were worried, like, why is a kid studying this? This is dark. This is horrific. And she was tied to that in a past life and was compelled to it. So let's look at Sheila's comment here. She says, my girlfriend Michelle and I wondered if it's possible to do it together to find out how we were connected previously. She's definitely my sister from another mister.
I would recommend doing it independently, but setting the intention to see. I think it could be a little difficult to do it jointly. I mean, you could, but I think to have the full amount of time for each session, for each person, to have the time to go in and get the details, and then to sort of compare notes.
And everybody goes under and is ready to proceed at different levels, and right.
Yeah.
So, but but something to think about. Is it the Michelle Williams, our very good friend from North Carolina? Sheila, let us know.
Yeah.
Or is that just a coincidence? But I don't think so. I think Sheila had an experience with, if I'm remembering correctly, Sheila had an experience with the web book where she dreamed of the web, although she had never been there.
I think that's the same Sheila. Yes.
Yes. Okay. Very, very cool. So Lori says, I have horrific nightmares, unspeakable things, makes me wonder. Yeah, definitely. I have, I am not a fan of handguns at all. Not irrational. I've been around them. I fired them. I know my way around them for various reasons. My father restored antique weapons. I write about them all the time. Because it helps me work through it, I think. Mm-hmm. But I think being killed in at least one life by a handgun explained that really, really irrational fear, because no one's ever pointed a loaded gun at me ever. Mm-hmm. I'd never been around it where I witnessed a violent thing where someone pulled a gun on someone. So definitely things to pay attention to. So yeah. So do you want to go quickly through? We talked about this case before, but you want to touch on it? We had a very compelling case. We wanted to end this episode with good news. We have heard directly from a spirit's mouth that reincarnation is real, because he had already picked out the parents. So you want to move just kind of quickly through this?
Yeah, and I've heard that. I was just kind of never mind. I'll tell you later what.
You can't do that. You can't keep secrets like we're in the cafeteria and the people are crying. Well, I'll just tell you later.
I didn't want to sound oppositional, but you said spirit's mouth, and it just kind of made me chuckle inside, because this little voice was just like, well, spirits don't have mouths, but
okay, maybe that could have waited until
but they
later.
do, but they don't. So that's just my little inner
You
world.
saw what he looked like, though, didn't you? Let me ask.
My brain.
You did see what he looked like.
No, I do. No,
yeah, so I mean, he wasn't just. No, let's be serious. He wasn't just like a little ball of light. I mean, you actually did see him.
No, that's why I was saying they do, but they don't. I see them the way that, of course, once we drop the physical body, we can look however we want. But generally, when I'm connecting with departed loved ones, they want me to recognize them so I can describe to the client, this is who I'm seeing.
Right, and get that verification.
Exactly. So in that sense, they do. So I just wanted to say this happens not incredibly frequently, but it happens often enough, that it makes me really it supports all of this that we're talking about, where people will say, yeah, I'm getting ready. I'm working on my next life. I've picked it all out.
Oh, great.
But this is a good example of that.
Yeah.
So in 2018, I was asked to do a reading for friends of some members of our family. And it was really for a mother and a teenage daughter who were mourning the loss of the son/brother who had died at age 7. He had been hit by a car. Now, the teenage daughter had never actually met her brother, but the family had always kept his memory alive. So she felt very much connected to him. There was always, family movies and pictures, and that they would include him. And of course, what a tragic thing. I can't imagine anything worse than losing a child, right? So the teenage daughter felt very connected to the brother. And, I had just asked, not a lot. Again, those of you who know me, when I do readings, I like to know as little as possible before I do the reading. So I didn't know a lot. I kind of just knew the basics, like, there was a brother and maybe the mother had lost a son, and that was pretty much it. So we happened to meet up we were kind of having a weekend retreat somewhere, and this friend had come along with family, and we met in the hotel room, and I was able to do the reading. The hotel room was a few hours away from the young woman's home. So, it just kind of goes to show you can contact them anywhere. It doesn't matter. They're not tied to any specific location, which is an important thing to note for some people who, always wonder about that. So, of course, as always happens, it comes through. I see exactly what he looks like. So I'm able to describe, okay, I have a little boy here. He's about 7 years old. This is what he looks like. Now, I didn't know the boy's age. I didn't know anything, just that, the basics. So the young woman was able to confirm that was indeed what the brother looked like. And then as they do, he begins showing me things that the family can confirm. He was showing me that he would often play with the mother's hair, like he would be with her and he would touch her hair and play with her hair. And the whole time that the teenage girl is like texting, because her mother wasn't able to be there. So she's texting with her mom. This is what she's saying now. And the mom would go, yes, that's yes. So I said, he's showing me that he plays with your mother's hair. The mother confirmed that. He showed me several of his toys. So in this particular reading, I was able to see their house. In my mind's eye, this again often happens. He shows me pretty much the whole house. He takes me upstairs. He shows me his old bedroom. He shows me like his blanket. He shows me his toy box. He shows me his toys. So I'm able to describe all of this. That was able to be confirmed. He showed me a photo album. And the mother confirmed that, yes, that they did have that photo album, that she looked at that photo album frequently. Then he showed me a baby's crib, and I wasn't sure. I was thinking, oh, this must be his crib as a baby. Then there's a baby inside, but actually the mother said that's the nephew that had recently come into the family. And then there was a mobile, and there were other things around it that the mother was able to say, yes, this is the nephew's crib. So the young boy was basically saying, I'm there, I'm watching over the nephew as well.
Who was named for him?
Who was named after him. Thank you.
Right.
He showed the football gear. And then the mother confirmed that his brother played football, and that he's showing me that he would play with it and he would move it around. And then the mother was like, yes, the gear goes missing sometimes. So that was very cool. He also showed me a broken hinge on a kitchen cabinet. Like, he was basically taking me all through the house, showing me all of these things. And I was just kind of calling it out as he was showing it to me. So the girl texted with mom, the kitchen hinge. And she was like, yes, that definitely happened. And he's showing me that the bathroom sink, the bathroom faucet keeps turning on. Yes, that keeps happening. Then he takes me underneath the sofa in the living room. And I'm like, I don't know what he's doing, but he's saying to look under the sofa in the living room. I don't know why. So the girl's mother was, at home at this time. So she goes and she looks under the sofa in the living room. And there is a coloring book, Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer, from the early 90s.
Yeah, it's an old coloring book. That's not theirs.
It had not been there. It's not like they had not looked under their sofa for 20 years.
Right, of course.
It wasn't there, and it just kind of apported there. And that was one of his favorite character in the Rankin Bass, the Bumble from the Rankin Bass
Right.
Christmas show.
None of the pages are colored in, but the Bumble, half of the last page is missing. And it was clear that it was the Bumble that happened to. So the question becomes, where is the half page of the Bumble that's missing?
Yeah.
Did someone own the coloring book and then find only the half page in its place? That's the cool thing about our journey as paranormal researchers. We're thinking in a much more circular, 3-dimensional, 4-dimensional, 5-dimensional, where if something shows up or a part of something shows up, where the heck is the rest of it? And is somebody looking for it?
I want to know, where did the book come from?
So a really, really great confirmation, right?
Mm-hmm.
So then
it turned a little bit more, but first of all, I have to tell you, like, how overjoyed the mother and the they were just beside themselves about this coloring book, which I kind of was too, because I have no explanation for, that was amazing. Then it kind of gets serious. And he's showing me his sick grandmother, very sick. And the young girl confirmed, yes, my grandmother is actually in the hospital right now. She's very, very sick. And she died 2 days after that reading. Then he was showing me his favorite socks.
I love this part. I love this
and
part.
I didn't know why, because I'm just seeing these rainbow, like striped rainbow socks with like toes, like the toe socks with the rainbows. You guys probably have all seen them. And I'm just like, I don't know why he's showing me these rainbow socks with toes. And the sister was like, oh my God, those were his favorite socks. And interestingly, our daughter, Jolie, who was there at the time, had those same socks.
And that's where it gets really bend time and space.
Yes, that's where it gets really interesting, because a few days before I did this reading, Jolie was staying with the family members who were friends with this young woman. And Jolie has my gift as well, and she had been seeing this young boy. She didn't know anything about this particular case either, so she didn't know the connection when she was seeing this young boy at her cousin's house,
just peeking around the corner,
wiggling his fingers and toes at her. He was touching her feet when she was sleeping, and then it became clear with the rainbow sock connection that it was him. Now, he was probably drawn to Jolie for a couple of reasons, because he could see her, because he knew that, her mother would be doing a reading and connecting, but also that they enjoyed the same kind of socks. So there was a cool connection there.
Yeah. And we don't know for sure, because we never know, or rarely know, but he may have implanted the idea for them to have the reading for the confirmation, because then he hits with a really big piece of news.
Yeah, which is he's getting ready to reincarnate, and he's already picked out the family, and that he's decided he's going to be a girl this time. And the family doesn't need to be sad, because he's going to go on and have a whole new life.
I love this case. We're including it in our grant case files. It clicks so many boxes. Space, time, going to Jolie beforehand. Not only is reincarnation real, but I already picked out the family, and I'm going to be a girl this time. Talk about subverting the dominant paradigm. If we come back as male, female, different races, all different, wow. And if we could remember those things, what a wonderful world this would be. That's why social justice, that's why sense of justice and righteousness, that maybe we're not all as different from each other as some of us like to pretend and make out to be. So we ran a little longer than we wanted to, but let's touch on this. Colette got some really good news. I found out last week in a dream who my spirit guide was. I confirmed it using my pendulum. Pendulum's a tool we love. And I got a name and where he was from. It's taken me years to find out.
Oh, that's wonderful. Congratulations, Colette. That is amazing.
And like you found when you regressed Barbara, and there's been write-ups, right? Barbara wrote an article. I think that on the alternate perception page, I think there's even video of the regression, all that kinds of things. So it's not private. All the research we're doing is public. That's the point of it, to share it with as many people as possible. But Barbara had been trying to connect with her father. even dead for years.
Yeah.
And all spirits come to her and ghosts, and
She's a
she's
medium
very
as well.
good at this kind of stuff.
Mhm.
He came to her at the exact right moment when he needed to. So I really believe it's part of our faith. You know, Doyle at the very end of his book, he says, we got to get away from faith and get into hard science. We need both. We need both. We need to believe in the first place. Everyone from Russell Targ to mystics and mediums have said, if you believe, it makes the process better. This is going to be stuff that's going to be very interesting to talk. This episode is a great segue into Mike Anthony.
Yes.
Love Dad appearance on Surviving Death. If you have time this week, check out Mike. You get a sense of him, and then he's going to be our guest, and it should be a great discussion. So Lori says, I've heard you alternate between male and female for each life. I think it's wonderful. If we're really coming here, if this is really a school to learn, we need to learn from all perspectives.
I think, to me too, it explains how, you know, some people may have very different, say, gender traits than what their physical body is.
Right.
Because they just have such a strong memory or association with the previous.
So this reincarnation work is really, to me now, has become at the forefront of proving that there is life after death. So pretty cool. So thank you for being with us. Happy birthday to Colette. Thank you all sharing your stories, supporting each other. It's a good place. It's a good place, and we're going to leave you. But before we do, we have written a new tag to the show, so we'd love to see what you think of it. Usually we say, join us next week when we journey, and we say Into the Outer Realms together. But it's time, 64 episodes in, to change it up a little. So here it goes. Join us next week when we go into the outer realms,
where the paranormal and supernatural are just
the normal and the natural.
Sorry, I messed it up.
We swear we do practice these things. We really do. So just one more time. Join us next week when we go into the outer realms,
where the paranormal and the supernatural are just
the normal and the natural.
We got to work on that. Or at least I did.
We got it that time. It was good. So we'll see you next week for Mike Anthony. We don't have time to go. We got great guests coming up, great topics, great shows. Return of the RTC in July to talk about Antarctica to chill things down when it's really hot. And so we will see you next time. Thank you very much.